Good morning, everyone. I see a few new people. I think Jose is new. Are there any other news which were not on the previous session? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 6. So I will show you quick a little bit what we were doing in the Let's Build session afterwards. It's a few slides for those who have already seen the slides and want to start already. There is this document available. And actually what you have to do to follow the exercise, and I help you through it if you have any problems, you need a Java runtime where you can execute. You don't need to compile or do anything. It's just that you have the Java can execute the jar file. And the second thing is you need to download the content of this folder. So you need to extract here this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 files. I'm sorry I didn't find a way here with GitHub that you can do it all in one, so you need to copy it one by one. The tutorial is then also described here. So you have the same. If you don't want to work in the PDF, you can also just copy it from this address up on top. So you have it, this address, these two addresses here. That's maybe a bit bigger. So I give you a minute too that you can go to the. Is it big enough? So, what we like to do is, in this Let's Build session, is validate the CDA document, convert the CDA document. This is a XML-based representation to the equivalent JSON representation. We can apply FHIR paths to a CDA document. We will make a sample for this and transform a CDA document to a FHIR document with the mapping language. So the different steps are described in this other page I have seen you. So that's actually the steps you have to do. You have all the sample files available. But now for a short introduction, I show you the few slides, what it's all about. The ones which already want to start, please feel free to go ahead. Please interrupt me if you have any question, if something you don't know. I'm assuming that everybody is familiar with CDA. Is this a good assumption, or does somebody needs to know something about CDA? Good. So. Do you want to follow the exercise? No. This is how a CDA could look like. What has been done now is you have the concept of a logical model in FHIR. So you can describe arbitrary structures like a CDA document, also with the logic which FHIR describes its own structures. This is called structure definitions. And what has been developed is a logical model for CDA. So how you can express a CDA document with FHIR structure definitions. This is work done by Graham. He presented it already at the DevDays in 2016. This has been further evolved. There is also Alexander Henkert from NICTIS and Sean McMillan working with it. And we continue to work on that model. There is no official release yet, but it's yet there. It's workable to use it for different tasks. It's not, you will have errors. It's not everything completely done, but it's getting closer. And what is then happens, this is the link to this model, so where the source is, where all these definitions R, and then afterwards it goes through the HL7 tooling stack. This is a program called IG Publisher. This is a Java, also a Java application, and this generates then this logical model. And you can also, this is browsable in the end when you generate it yourself. So you have, that's not readable. But then you see now the FHIR, or not the FHIR, let's see if we get a mess in the head. You see now a FHIR IG Publisher representation of this CDA document. So you have a clinical document, you have an attribute class code, a mood code, then an element realm code. You see the different types, so you can click on it here. So you have this is the CS data type, which has only, you see that this has a differential. This structure is derived from the CV data type. Then you have the CE data type. So you can browse like a regular FHIR-based implementation guide. You can go through all this CDA document. And what we use now for this exercise, we actually don't know how this model, it's just an input to our tooling now. But if you are interested in, this is where you could look and get it from. So we have a model for all V3 data types which are used in CDA, like a Boolean, concept descriptors coded with equivalents. And then we have also a model for all the classes which CDA uses. So you have a clinical document, you have an act, etc. So this is represented in this model. There are a few specialities. I won't go now through it, but there are a few specific things which are different in XML than in the CDA world than in FHIR world. We have multiple attributes. In FHIR you always have only the value attribute. You have type attributes in XML, so that means the type is defined in the only in the document. You can have different types. You have in CDA narrative, which is a other markup language. It's not HTML or XHTML like we have in FHIR. And there are a few more issues. If you have any questions for this, you can ask me for questions or interrupt me. But now I think we try. Yeah.
Are all V3 classes and types modeled in this, or it's just only what is for the CDA?
It's only the origin of the project was CCDA, so it's not it's not everything modeled what is in V3. No, so it's I would say also not, it's not a one-to-one map from the, it's not every class in CDA at the moment currently also explicitly modeled out. So there are a few things where there were simplifications made. So it's not a one-to-one copy of the CDA schema, for example, or the hierarchical description. There are some differences out of, I don't know, historical reasons maybe. No, there was a different approach. But you have the CDA stack model. So what you can do now when you have this output of this logical model, you can use that now with the Java validator. So is everybody familiar with the Java FHIR validator? This is coming with the specification itself. So there is the Java reference implementation, and the Java reference implementation has a validator inside. And with this validator, you can check that if you have a resource, if it conforms to the resource itself. And if you define a specific profile, like when we have national profiles, we can check if this resource conforms to a specific profile. And what you can do now also is, instead of saying just this specific profile, we can verify now if this CDA document is valid with this logical model, because in these logical models you have profiles, they are applied to the CDA document, and we can show now, or we can run this validation step also on the CDA document. So this is a jar file which you have in this download section. It's a bit, there were some issues with running it with the official validator. So that's a special jar file. Normally you can just download it from the HL7 website. This will be possible, I guess, in a few days, weeks, because Graham started integrating all pull requests. There is only one open, and as soon as this integrated, we will have the same functionality. But for now, you have to use just this jar file. So to run now, you have a sample XML file. This is this CDA original, what we want to check if it's correct, and you execute it with the Java runtime. So this is the XML file. And what you see, what it does, so this is the, so this is what will be executed. So we say use please the validator, which you have from the downloads. We specify this is a version 4.01, so the current release 4 we want to use. We provided the package where this logical model is inside, and then as a last argument, the CDA file. And what you see what happened now is the validator is called. He downloads the package for the release 4. Then he connects also to the terminology server, and then he loads the implementation guide, our CDA model, and then he starts validating the CDA document. And what you see here now, you have now success. He has 0 errors, 0 warnings. There are some informations in here that there is some issues with, you could not verify a slice for a profile, but that's the process how you can do that. So I give you 2-3 minutes if you want to run that you have the same on your side. If anybody is stuck, please. I'm trying to help, or could already everybody do it? Not yet. Good. So. Need some help, or? So, this was the nice example. Just a bit of a warning. So, this is still work in progress. So, if you validate documents, you will get sometimes errors. So this is not yet stable enough to run everything. Oh, that's an error which is not the one I wanted to show. So what you see here is on one side, this is another document, and there are some issues with terminology currently. So version 3 has its own terminology set, like ACT code, MUD codes, and currently the terminology server gives some error. So this we still have to work on. This will be fixed in a future release, but yeah. So use it with care. If the validator gives an error, it could be that it's not the problem of the document, but the problem of the validator. So this is one area where there is work to be done. Then there is other things which are then a bit CDA specific. You have certain CDA documents where you can specify a timestamp but not time zone. And the validator is stricter. It requires you that when you specify date and time, that you also have to specify a time zone. This is the basic FHIR. Most CDA implementation guide actually enforce this too, as far as I know, but in this example there was no. So if you have an error message, take care. There is also a Zulip group. You can post there in the implementers channel, and I think there is one for the CDA for the logical model. So if there is you have a question or something like this, feel free also to look there for support. I think there is a CDA stream, and I think there is one also for the mapping. There is one for the mapping framework, yes, that's. But I was thinking there should be. So there is the mapping framework, and there is the CDA FHIR mapping stream. So if you have an issue, I would post it there in the CDA FHIR mapping stream. I think that's probably the most efficient part.
Question: what happened with the AD data type that was giving errors in the previous validation?
In the first validation, I couldn't track it down completely yet. This is a slicing error. So the AD type is with different types inside, and this is sliced, but it's only in information at the moment. I think it has something to do with the slicing changed a little bit in R4, so I think there is something inside but it's information, so you don't have to worry that much. Are there any questions for the validator? If no, then we continue to the second step. What we can do now with the validator also is this CDA is a XML document representation. We describe it with a logical model, and FHIR has also the JSON representation. So what we can do now is we can convert that CDA document to the logical model in a JSON format. For me, it's been sometimes a little bit around in the head because it's not FHIR, but it's like a FHIR version of a CDA document because you have all these value elements. So what you get is you have here this original XML file. So I have type ID, root extensions, template ID, root ID extension, root code system. If I go to now this converted version, I have a resource type clinical document. This is not an official resource, but logical model resource, a type ID with an extension, root. So this is like the JSON representation of a CDA in XML. What this conversion with the validator does also is that you have where is the text? So what you see here is the CDA documents have a markup language. So you have a text part, the narrative language, and then you have a markup language with content or tables or lists, and this is not HTML or not XHTML. So at that time, CDA has defined its own standard for a markup language. It's very close to HTML, but you need to convert it. For, I think, traditional CDA documents, you have often a style sheet applied to it, which converts then this markup language to HTML that the browser can present it directly. And what this converter does is also it converts the HTML directly to XHTML. This CDA markup language to XHTML markup language. So we have at the end a representation of your resource with HTML also instead of the CDA. And that's what you have seen here already, the result. What you can do now is there is a special operation introduced in the validator that you can convert this CDA document to the JSON representation. And that's actually not specific to CDA. You can use that convert function for any other logical model, or even just for a FHIR resource itself if you want to convert it from XML to JSON or back. So this is now, but when you specify the model here, our CDA model, you put this convert option in and you say the output file in JSON, he will convert you this XML in JSON. So that might be mildly interesting, but there is one use case which I show you afterwards. So if you have shortly time and energy to do that, try it out that you have that file, because we will need it in the next step. Then the next part. Who knows FHIR? Nobody. Little bit. FHIR is XML, not an XML, is a, you know, XPath. XPath is a way of asking for a specific part of a XML information out of a document. And during the development of FHIR, they were working with JSON also a lot, so you couldn't use XPath for JSON objects. So they developed FHIR, and I think there were some other reasons too, but it's an extraction language, how you can extract data out of FHIR resources. And what you can use that now also is you cannot use it only for now FHIR data, but you can use it on this data on the CDA document. So let me quickly show you the slide here. So now it's somehow like XPath. The syntax is very similar. If you have here a XML document where you have a record target, you have a patient role inside, and then you have a patient with a name, and this he is called Henry. I can now provide a FHIR path extraction. So record target dot goes me into that tree. Patient role goes me into the patient role. Patient goes into the patient. Name goes into the name. Given goes into given. And since this one is not a value attribute like it's in FHIR, you have to here provide data string. That's because of the logical model. But so this is a very easy FHIR path expression. You can do very complicated FHIR path expression. There is, I think, a session this afternoon, if anybody is interested in, at 2 o'clock, I think. So, but what you can do now is also, you cannot do this only on JSON, but with the validator, you can execute it also with this operation on a CDA document. So you can, instead of, when you want to extract some information, you can use that, like here. So that would be the third part of the exercise, to apply such a FHIR path expression to a CDA document. You can do that with the validator. I can show you an alternative when you have that JSON file open. There are different possibilities. So you can also do that. There is for VS Code now a FHIR tools extension. And you should be able to open a FHIR path window. And what you can do here now is you just can type it in and you see the return value. So if the record target, then I'm interested in the patient role. So I get the patient role, then I go down to the patient and then patient name given. And then you get down to your object. And the same can also, this is based on a Java script implementation from Nikolai and Paul. So he has also an online demo tool link. You have them in the slides. You don't have to use Visual Code for that. Good. And now to the last exercise. What you can do also, and this is where it gets a bit more complicated, is you have a few maps available which allow you to transform clinical documents into equivalent FHIR structures. So there are different bundles here in this map different maps here in this directory where you have a map how you can map a clinical document to a FHIR bundle. And the Java validator allows you to execute such maps, and you can start converting your CDA document to a FHIR document afterwards. This has some limitation, so that work started with CDA and adapted it here for this tutorial to CDA, and this will convert you only down to the section level, so there is no entry-level stuff yet. I'm also, if you were following before, I don't think it will be generally possible to just convert CDA to FHIR. So you will need to do this then specific on each template you have in a Exchange format to convert that. But now to execute these simple maps, and is this the you specify a transform parameter with the Java validator, and you have to provide it where the maps are with an additional parameters, and then it should work to convert you those files. This is not the only, here in this demonstration we have just a Java version. FHIR announced this week also the .NET Wonk version, how you could do transformations. Alexander, I don't know, maybe we managed to do the conversion also with this CDA documents, or we have to look if that works. And there is also yesterday, they told from a JavaScript version which is in development. So this is topic which is coming on slowly. What?
Are these structure maps?
At the moment they are only text files, but we can convert them to structure maps.
If there were structure maps, I guess we could make that work.
Okay, let's. So, yeah. We convert them to structure maps in that case. So I execute this transform here. Then you see a lot of output, helps you if you have any. Have a quick look. I just show you the result. So my version here without the exception is here. So you see you have now not a CDA representation anymore, but you have a bundle, identifier mapped, you have the composition resource, which is the first in a document. You have an extension here to map the template ID inside, and then you have the coding part of the document, which is now here a coding. You have a patient generated, which is referenced, so a patient resource instead of the record target. So that's a bit where we are at the moment. There is continued work to do this, so you cannot just convert everything. You have to do some additional work, but it's one approach.
For example, take value. Value has the type representation.
Yeah.
And then we would need to map that to a FHIR choice type, right? Because somewhere, if you look up the value, that should be then value annotated as a postfix with the type, right? Like value identifier.
Yes.
So in the XML version, that postfix should be the type attribute. So there must be some special logic to merge that, right? Or how do you do that?
So you need to do some logic in the maps to do that. Yes. So you have when you have
also in the engine, right?
the engine. So the parser which parses the logical model has to be special, yeah, because he has to understand all these different types and XSE types and attributes and stuff. So the parser is a special way because to read in, but afterwards it's just the maps. You don't need any additional logic.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah. Any more questions? Last one. So I think we are out of time. I stay here for a few minutes to solve the issues if you have some issues. So thanks a lot for attending. If you have any questions, please stop by or send me an email, post on Tulip, whatever you prefer. Thanks a lot.